Good morning. Welcome to all of you to our daily online press briefing. Thank you for joining us on EBS and here in the press room. Today is Friday, 4th of September. As usual, on Fridays, I would like to start with the President's agenda for next week. So next week, next Wednesday, as usual, the President will chair the college meeting. Now, you will remember that the college decided in July to set up a task force to coordinate the implementation of recovery plans across the EU. A steering board chaired by President von der Leyen and composed of the three executive vice presidents and Commissioner Gentiloni was also set up to provide political steer to the task force and ensure the proper coordination of its work. This steering board will meet for the first time on Wednesday. Executive Vice President Dombrovskis will report to the college subsequently on the deliberations of this steering board. Then on Thursday morning, the President will participate in the Conference of Presidents of the European Parliament. Later that day, the President will participate in a video conference on the ACT Accelerator with WHO Director General Dr. Tedros and international partners. Finally, on Thursday afternoon, the President will receive Mrs. Irache García Pérez, the President of the S&D Group in the European Parliament. Maintenant, je voudrais donner la parole à Myriam pour une annonce sur le plan d'action pour l'agriculture biologique. Myriam, tu as la parole pour ta toute première annonce.
Merci Eric. Bonjour. Aujourd'hui, la Commission européenne lance une consultation publique sur son futur plan d'action pour l'agriculture biologique. Ce secteur jouera un rôle important dans la réalisation de l'ambition du Pacte vert pour l'Europe et des objectifs fixés dans la stratégie de la ferme à la table et dans la stratégie en faveur de la biodiversité. La Commission estime qu'il est primordial de veiller à ce que le secteur de l'agriculture biologique soit doté des instruments adéquats et d'un cadre juridique efficace et consensuel, ce qui est fondamental pour atteindre l'objectif de 25% des terres agricoles consacrées à l'agriculture biologique d'ici à 2030. À la demande des États membres, des Parlements européens, des pays tiers et des autres parties prenantes, la Commission propose donc également aujourd'hui de reporter d'un an, au 1er janvier 2022, l'entrée en vigueur de la nouvelle législation relative à l'agriculture biologique. Vous trouverez plus d'informations dans le communiqué de presse en ligne. Merci.
Merci Myriam. Enfin, je vous rappelle qu'à 14 h, nous accueillerons ici en salle de presse le commissaire Reinders et la commissaire Johansson. Ils vous présenteront la proposition de la Commission pour plus de clarté et de prévisibilité des mesures restreignant la libre circulation dans l'Union européenne. Et maintenant, nous pouvons commencer à répondre à vos questions. Et je passe immédiatement la parole à Athanasios.
Thank you very much, Eric.
We've lost you. It's because you didn't say bonjour, as you usually say. Press speak. There you are.
Is that on now? Okay.
It is.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. I changed devices and it's, confusing sometimes. Anyway, so it's a matter of freedom of press. What I'm going to ask, two colleagues of ours traveled to a Greek island the last couple of days. They were correspondents of the Anadolu Press Agency, and immediately after they traveled and they checked in their hotel, they found their passports published in a news portal in Greece. Actual pictures of their passports, which actually, the only one who can have your passport when you check in a hotel is the hotel and the police and no one else, with unfounded allegations about spying and stuff. I know the situation is tense in the Aegean. I know it's tense between the two countries. I know various things are said and written, but the work of the press is another thing, and everybody has the right to do his job without being bullied or accused or having his passport published in a news portal. So, what's going to happen next? What would you suggest the Greek authorities to do with this situation? And how can we be sure that something like this doesn't happen next time someone who is not liked by some travels to an area and tries to do his job? Thanks.
Thank you, Athanasios. Without having any details on the story apart from what you have just said now, let me just reiterate as a matter of principle that, of course, the European Commission supports the freedom of the press and the capacity of journalists to exercise their profession in a framework that is both secure and allows them to carry out their work effectively. Now, as you yourself have said, it is clear that if there is an incident of that nature, the port of call is the national authorities who have the powers to investigate what has happened on this, and we would certainly hope that such an investigation can lead to an understanding of how such events, if they are confirmed, could take place. Christian, do you want to add something?
I don't have much to add on this. Thanks, Athanasios. Thanks, Eric. We've seen the press reports about this incident that you describe. As you likely say, there's questions about press freedom and probably questions about data protection and other rights. And as Eric has said, we have a very clear position and clear commitment to press freedom and pluralism, and also for journalists to be protected in their work and to be safe. But as always, when it comes to individual cases, it would be for the relevant national authorities to look into this and clarify this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Athanasios. Are there any other questions for Christian while he is on the podium on this or on other issues related to rule of law? I see, Lily, you have your hand raised. So if it is for Christian, go ahead. No, you have unraised your hand. Okay, I see no further questions for Christian. Now you are back, Lily. Is it for Christian?
Sorry, yes, it is for
Okay.
Christian. Sorry. I have a question on Bulgaria. I saw your responses yesterday, but I wanted to follow up nonetheless because I was just reading some very horrifying descriptions of police violence against journalists in Bulgaria this week. And I was wondering if the Commission is in a position to directly and on the record condemn what happened in Bulgaria, because looking back at your comments yesterday, I didn't find a statement to that effect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lily, for the question. I can only reiterate what I made clear yesterday, which is that the Commission is aware of the process and that we continue to follow the situation in Bulgaria very closely. And as I've said, we've always been clear that peaceful protests, peaceful demonstrations are fundamental rights in all democratic societies, and that we support the right to peaceful protest. When it comes to violence, the Commission has always held a clear position that there is no place for violence, and at the same time that law enforcement is a matter under competence of the member states. However, any use of force must always be exercised in a proportionate manner.
Thank you, Christian. Other questions for Christian on the issue of Bulgaria? Is there a follow-up, Lily?
Yes, I do have a follow-up. Just a more general question. We often hear the European Commission condemning violence against journalists in different countries, and yet I'm just a bit confused why the Commission is choosing not to directly condemn the violence in this case, but just make a general statement.
Well, when you ask about journalists or media, I mean, what I can add probably is that it is also essential, of course, that journalists covering demonstrations can do their work in the best safety and safe conditions as possible without any hindrance. So as I just also said on the further questions, we stand very clear on the freedom of the press and on the need for member states to ensure safety of journalists.
Yes, Lily, I think the answer that I gave to the question raised by Athanasios in the context of Greece applies here as well. The European Commission believes that the freedom of the press is a fundamental principle of our society, and that therefore journalists must be able to operate in conditions that allow them to do their job. Now, in the European Union, we have rule of law. We have a system in place where member states are responsible for carrying out investigations on allegations or acts of violence against journalists, as in fact they are responsible for investigations on any other acts in relation to demonstrations that are taking place. And that is why we refer you to the member states. But as far as we are concerned, it is very clear. Journalists must be allowed to operate also in the context of demonstrations, also when there are tensions, in a manner which allows the public to be informed, and member states have the responsibility to ensure that this is done in the national legal framework that applies. Thank you. Are there other questions now for Christian on rule of law matters? I do not see any, so let me open the floor to other questions today. And I pass the floor to Mose.
Hi, Eric. Thank you very much. I would like to take the opportunity to ask a question about the audit report, which was published yesterday by the Court of Auditors. It's about European semester, and this focus on the country-specific recommendations issued by the Commission in order to achieve, the targets for Europe 2020. And I think that the main finding of the report was that, let's say, only a minority of those recommendations have been addressed or implemented by the member states, and especially as regards the target to reduce people at risk of poverty, and also the target of public spending on research and development. So my question is, does the Commission accept the findings of the report, and what does it plan to do in the future to reach, especially I think, the target of poverty reduction, which can be very difficult now during the post-corona crisis? Thank you.
Jose, I pass the floor to Marta on this issue.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Eric, and thank you, Mose, for your questions. So we take note of yesterday's report by the European Court of Auditors on the country-specific recommendations issued as part of the European semester. On the issue of implementation that you mentioned, it is important to note that while further progress can and of course should be made to encourage reform implementation, I would like to stress that between 2011 and 2019, around 70% of recommendations have seen at least some implementation, which obviously shows that reform efforts at member states level is being carried out, although this may take a little bit longer. In this context, I would also like to stress that the new Recovery and Resilience Facility is set to provide a major new incentive for member states to implement reforms as recommended in the European semester. Concerning the second point you mentioned that was highlighted by the report, the fight against poverty, here I have to stress that the Commission takes this issue very seriously and is committed to lifting people out of poverty by addressing the poverty risks. We will continue to fully address the socioeconomic consequences of the coronavirus crisis and the structural challenges in member states' social protection systems in the semester process, but also beyond. And of course, I encourage you to read the Commission's full responses to the Court of Auditors' points and recommendations, which are available online, have been published as part of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Are there other questions for Marta on this issue? I do not see any other questions for Marta, either on economic affairs or employment. I see that there's one hand raised. Sarantis for Marta.
No, this is not related. It's not about Marta, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Hold on there for a second then. Any other questions for Marta? I do not see any, so you have the floor then. Go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is for Peter. Basically, Turkey has said that it wants a dialogue with Greece without conditions. Greece, on the other hand, disagrees with an unconditional dialogue. What is the exact position of the European Commission on this matter?
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarantis. The position is still the same as we were discussing this week in the aftermath of the informal meeting of the foreign ministers in Berlin last week. Namely, dialogue has to start. The negotiations have to proceed in order to de-escalate the unacceptable tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean. This is both in the interest of Turkey and the European Union, and the HRVP is personally very much engaged in this regard and is trying in his contacts to convey the messages and achieve that instead of unilateral steps and exchange of threats and declarations, we have finally a dialogue started and discussions ongoing how to settle and diffuse the tensions which are currently in the Eastern Mediterranean.
Can I add something on that, Peter, please? Because actually the launch of the dialogue is blocked due to this disagreement. The European Commission has said it shows full solidarity to Greece and Cyprus. Does this solidarity mean that you also agree with Greece and Cyprus that the dialogue should have conditions? Thank you.
Well, the question of EU solidarity has been raised and expressed by the EU on numerous occasions. The EU stands in solidarity with Cyprus and Greece in the current problems in the Eastern Mediterranean, facing the actions and unilateral steps done by Turkey. The EU was very clear, the EU 27 were very clear in what we expect in order to diffuse the tensions. And as I can only repeat, the only way forward is the dialogue. Engagement. Only engagement and dialogue bring lasting solutions, the escalation and stability. And this is what we want to see and what we need to see.
Thank you, Peter. Are there other questions for Peter on the issue of the Greek-Turkish dialogue? I think, Athanasios, you're asking for the floor on this. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yes, it's Elise. And yesterday, Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, announced some kind of technical talks between Greece and Turkey for avoiding future incidents and accidents in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Turkish foreign minister welcomed the initiative. The Greek side said that it was too early and they didn't actually announced that they agree with the initiative. Anyway, the initiative is there. NATO Secretary General announced it. How do you comment on this thing? And when are we going to hear from your side a similar announcement on similar talks? Thanks.
Well, thank you, Athanasios. On the issue related to the NATO and its member states, I would probably only say that I can refer you to the NATO to ask the questions in this framework. And on the second part of your question, we would wish to see talks, initiatives, steps done in the direction of having the dialogue as soon as possible. So this is what the HRVP is engaged very intensively in the last few days, and in this respect we also welcome the engagement of Germany, and we hope that it will be possible soon to see the escalation, because the alternative is escalation, and this is not something which is in the interest of the EU and which is not in the interest of Turkey.
Okay, I see two further hands raised. We will continue on this issue. So, Ruslan, if it's on this issue, you have the floor.
Hello, but not on this issue. May I have a question on Belarus or not right now?
Hold on. Let's see if we can finish first on Greece and Turkey. We will come back to you. Are there other questions on this? No. So, in fact, we do come back to you, Ruslan, for your question on Belarus then. Go ahead.
Thanks. My question of sanctions against Belarus. We are waiting for the list, and I want to ask you, when will the list be published? And is it true that the president of Belarus is not included in this list because of the position of Germany, France, and Italy? We have such information. Thanks.
Thank you, Ruslan. The information will be published once the decision is made and adopted by the member states. It is not the case. The discussions on the listings are ongoing. That's why I'm not going to comment also on the speculations whether Lukashenko will be on there or not. The member states are discussing the final scope of the final list of those who will be sanctioned. So the scope, the extent, and those who would be sanctioned are subject of ongoing discussions, and it's premature for me to set any timelines. I can only recall the political commitment made by the EU foreign ministers that we want to see the results as soon as it gets.
Thank you. Let's continue with questions on Belarus. Marina, is your question on this? If yes, please go ahead. If not, raise your hand. No. Okay, I see no other questions on Belarus. If it's a question for Peter, Marina, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. It's for Peter. Peter, regarding the dialogue that is right now holding on in Washington between Belgrade and Pristina, can you tell us what is the reaction from EU as a main facilitator of this dialogue, and what are your expectations from the continuation of the dialogue when both parties are back in Brussels from Washington? Thank you.
Thank you, Marina. The meeting in the United States is an event organized by our American partners in the framework of their activities, how to discuss issues between Kosovo and Serbia. So that's basically what I can say about it. We have been saying all along that whatever activity can positively feed in and support the EU-facilitated dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina on normalizing the relations is of course welcome. And the next high-level meeting of this dialogue will take place next Monday in Brussels in person, when the EU Special Representative for the dialogue, Miroslav Lajčák, and the HRVP, Josep Borrell, will be hosting the President of Serbia, Aleksandar Vučić, and Prime Minister of Kosovo, Abdullah Hoti. And our expectations from this dialogue from this meeting in the framework of the EU-facilitated dialogue in Brussels, is that the partners will continue their discussions. It's not the first meeting, it's already the third high-level meeting, which follows also rounds of expert-level meetings. So we hope that we will be able to continue in the positive momentum and in the positive dynamics which are in this dialogue, and we will be able to move forward in solving issues and getting closer to finding a solution to all the open issues, which in the end eventually should lead to an agreement on normalizing the relations, legally binding agreement on normalizing the relations. So this is the thrust, and this is what is going on in the framework of the ongoing process of EU-facilitated dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina.
Thank you, Peter. Are there other questions on this dialogue for Peter? Marina, you still have your hand raised. Do you have a follow-up? If not, raise your hand. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I have a short follow-up, Peter. Is EU in some kind of the coordination with the US? Do you know actually what they are talking about there, since this is something that goes into the one dialogue, and since you said that the US is a partner of EU in this matter?
Well, of course, we are aware. Our American partners have informed us on the agenda of the meeting, which is going on in the United States right now, and they inform us about the modalities of it taking place, and that's how it's supposed to be, and how we always have the exchanges with our partners if they are organizing anything that can feed into or support the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina in a positive way.
Marina, I see you still have your hand raised. Another follow-up? Brief, if possible.
Just a brief one. Is the mutual recognition part of the talks that are going on in Washington, if you are already informed about them?
The talks in Washington are event organized by our American partners. They are not part of the EU facilitated dialogue, so this question would be best addressed to the American organizers of this meeting.
Thank you, Peter. I see no other questions on this issue. Are there other questions for Peter today on external relations? That does not seem to be the case. Thank you, Peter. I open the floor to other issues. Please raise your hand. Lily, you have the floor.
Thanks, Eric. I have a quick question about the nomination process to replace former Commissioner Hogan. So the Irish government is set to soon put forward 2 names. I was wondering if you have a sense of the timeline. So once the names are submitted to President von der Leyen, how much time she will take to assess these 2 names before announcing which one she's picking, and whether there would be any changes to their portfolios. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily. I cannot give you a precise timeline, obviously, because it will depend in part on the names which are submitted by the Irish government. I'm sure that the President will be eager to balance the necessity to have a thorough assessment of the candidates and speed. We will have to see how what that implies in terms of the actual timing. But just to remind you that this is only the first step in an institutional process that will involve, in particular, also the European Parliament and ultimately the Council. So the timeline for the whole process depends on many, many more steps than the evaluation that the President will do of the name or names put forward by the Irish government. Right. Are there other questions on this issue? That does not seem to be the case. I open the floor to other issues. I think, Catherine, you had asked for the floor. Hello. Catherine, you have the floor.
Hello, Eric. I'm afraid I want to go back to Bulgaria, and I'm really trying hard to understand something here. I mean, the Commission has a cooperation and verification mechanism there for Romania and Bulgaria. It's specifically there because these countries didn't fully meet the requirements on judicial reforms, corruption, and in the case of Bulgaria in particular, organized crime. And in the Commission's last report, on these areas, it found that Bulgaria had met benchmarks related to organized crime. And I just want to know, why do you think there's such a wide divide between your understanding of what the situation is in Bulgaria and the situation as it's understood by Bulgarians, who are now, I think, protesting for the 57th night in a row against corruption and what they consider to be a mafia state? I mean, who does the Commission deal with? Is it speaking with civil society when it draws up these reports? Is it dealing with organizations that represent media, the judiciary, with non-governmental organizations with civil society?
Thank you for your question, Catherine. I pass the floor to Christian.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Yeah, this allows me to clarify where we stand as regards the CVM and the rule of law mechanism, actually, the upcoming one. So, as you rightly said, in the last CVM report of October 2019, the Commission considered that the progress made by Bulgaria is sufficient to meet the commitments made at the time of Bulgaria's accession to the EU. At the same time, and that's also important to note, we made clear that Bulgaria needs to ensure a continued implementation of the necessary reforms, notably relating to judicial independence and the fight against corruption. So this position is well known and it has not changed. Of course, we also have, as I just mentioned, the upcoming new rule of law report and the new rule of law mechanism, which will give the Commission the means to pursue work with Bulgaria on necessary reforms. So the Commission will continue to follow closely the situation in Bulgaria and report, as for all member states, in the upcoming rule of law report at the end of this month.
On the issue of with whom we cooperate when we're drawing up the report.
Thank you for the reminder. Indeed, of course, for the CVM reports that we have done in the past, there was broad consultation with many stakeholders, of course, from within the judicial system, but also from civil society, which have always been consulted. So this was always a quite complex process that has led to these reports, which have always been well informed. And the same is actually true on the upcoming rule of law report, on which we have consulted very broadly. There were hundreds of video meetings taking place, of virtual country visits, because physical country visits in spring were obviously difficult. So also the rule of law report that we are now preparing has been broadly consulted with representatives of the judiciary, of prosecution services, of civil society, NGOs. So stay tuned for this report.
Thank you, Christian. Catherine, I believe you have a follow-up.
Can I just make sure that I've understood this? The rule of law mechanism, that's not going to be in place for quite some time. The new mechanism and the new proposals, if I understand correctly, and does it replace the CVM process? And finally, if I may, is there any way, where organizations or people can proactively contact the Commission and make their views heard and their concerns about corruption in Bulgaria?
Can I step in just there 1 second, Christian? I think we need to distinguish different things, Catherine. I think I have understood that the rule of law mechanism that you're referring to is actually the rule of law, the regulation on the rule of law in the context of the negotiations taking place on the MFF. And that indeed is one of the elements which is on the table in the ongoing discussions to finalize the forthcoming multi-annual financial framework. But that is distinct from the first set of rule of law reports, which Christian was mentioning, which will be presented soon by the European Commission. So we have different things, and none of this is linked directly to the CVM mechanism, which was the previous mechanism in place at the time of accession of Bulgaria and Romania.
Yes, indeed. So much going on rule of law, one can easily get confused. But indeed, as Eric said, what I was now referring to as a rule of law mechanism is the work that starts basically with the rule of law report, which is the first time that the European Commission is looking at the rule of law situation in all member states, and which is thought to be, or where one of the very important goals is to create a culture of the rule of law and the dialogue on these issues. So there will also then be formalized also discussions with the member states on the rule of law and on the results. I can maybe say a few more words about the rule of law report to clarify this also. It will focus on significant developments, both positive and negative, in 4 areas: the justice systems, the anti-corruption framework, media pluralism, and other institutional issues related to checks and balances. Where relevant, the report will also reflect recent developments with regards to emergency measures adopting during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the report, as I just alluded to, will serve as a basis to kickstart a genuine political debate on the rule of law between the member states in the Council, with the European Parliament, and at national level, such as national parliaments and civil society. So much for this. Back to your question on Bulgaria. Again, as we said in the last report, Bulgaria has made sufficient progress to meet its commitments, and at the same time needs to ensure a continued implementation of necessary reforms. How will this happen? The monitoring of the continued implementation of the reforms put in place by Bulgaria will need to be ensured by the Post-Monitoring Council, which was set up in Bulgaria. And in the meantime, the Commission has also been working with Bulgaria, as I said, in the framework of the new rule of law mechanism, which will give the Commission the means to pursue work with Bulgaria on necessary reforms.
Thank you very much. Now, Catherine, you have asked a very important question as to the means that are available to citizens if they have suspicions of fraud or irregularities. And I would like to call Balázs up to the podium to give you some insights into the mechanisms that exist on this. Balázs.
Indeed, thank you, Eric, for giving me the opportunity to present some elements on my side as well. So, of course, the Commission in general has zero tolerance for fraud. We act whenever we learn about possible irregularities or fraud affecting the EU budget. It can interrupt or the Commission can interrupt or suspend payments to beneficiaries or member states and impose financial corrections and recover money already paid. Now, since 2014, the Commission has also further stepped up its efforts. So prevention and ex-post controls protect the EU budget through, for example, audits or the European Anti-Fraud Office, OLAF, or via rules on avoiding conflicts of interest, money laundering, or tax avoidance, or the early detection and exclusion system, which is called shortly EDES. Now, in 2019, we went a step further. We upgraded as well our anti-fraud strategy for better prevention, detection, and sanctioning of fraud, and more coordination is also ensured now among Commission departments. And the last remark, if I may, this year the EPPO, so the European Public Prosecutor's Office, is set to start its activities with 22 member states on board. And we expect this to be an important game changer in the fight against fraud when it comes to the EU budget.
Thank you, Balázs. So the bodies to fight irregularities in the use of the EU budget exist. They function. They are available to citizens who can report cases of suspected fraud or irregularities to them, and in particular, of course, OLAF. And these bodies then investigate these. And it's very important to say that this is the basis on which the European Union acts, specific allegations of irregularity on specific payments made by the European Union. And then, of course, we have the systems in place to try to ensure that from a systemic point of view, the management of funds in any given country or for any given program are properly put in place and implemented to ensure the proper use of EU funds. Right. Now, I only see one further hand raised for the moment, and it is from Tommaso. So, Tommaso, you have the floor.
Hi, Eric. Good afternoon. I have a question on the steering body that you mentioned at the beginning of the press conference, the one on the recovery plans. What are the tasks of this body, particularly at this stage where the government are still expected to submit their plans? And a second question, if I may, I'd like to know what the members are going to discuss in this first meeting. Is there a public agenda or something like that? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me give the floor to Marta on this question.
Hello, Tommaso, and thank you for your question. So the steering board, which was indeed announced by Eric earlier at this meeting, has been set up to oversee the work of the task force, which is located in the Secretariat General of the Commission. And it will then oversee all the steps of the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, meaning that it will provide political steer and ensure coordination of its work. And this includes providing support to the member states on the preparation of their recovery and resilience plans, dialogue with member states to ensure that the recovery and resilience plans comply indeed with the requirements of which have been set and deliver on the objectives on the green and digital transition, and in particular also in the future prepare the necessary acts for the approval of the plans, and more broadly coordinate the European semester going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I think what I would like to add is the fact that it is of paramount importance to President von der Leyen that the Recovery and Resilience Facility and the national plans that will implement it are used as vectors for investment and reform, taking into account the political priorities that have been set by the Commission, and in particular the twin transition, the twin green and digital transition. When we're talking about political steer, it is about making sure that the national plans, which will be presented by member states, go in that direction, help the member states reach the objectives that we have set for that twin transition, and do so in a coordinated manner. So there is indeed a lot of work ahead of us. Are there other questions on this issue for Marta? I do not see any, so let me open the floor to any other subject. Please raise your hands. Naomi, you have the floor. You know the drill. You've done it a million times. I'm sure it'll work. I'm speaking too quickly. You may have a technical issue, Naomi. It does not seem to be working. So I invite you to contact us bilaterally after the midday with your question. Are there any other questions for us today? I do not see any, so please reconnect at 2 p.m. for the press conference by Commissioners Johansson and Reinders. And let me wish you already in advance an excellent weekend, and I will have the pleasure of seeing you again on Monday. Thank you very much.